From a childhood so dark and frightening it could have been written by Charles Dickens, to becoming a household name from her roles in both the Broadway and film versions of The Miracle Worker. She followed that up with her own sitcom, and then starred in the cult classic Valley of the Dolls. Today, she's just as well known for her bipolar disorder that's made her an outspoken and dedicated activist for those dealing with mental health issues. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on InnerVIEWS, our conversation with Oscar and Emmy-winning actress and best-selling author, Patty Duke. Are you still surprised that people remember the Patty Duke Show?
Yes. To me, most of the time, it's been 45-ish years ago. You know what most surprises me is the age of the people. It now goes from 20s-ish to ish. And, of course, you know, I remind myself that there are reruns, but there haven't been reruns of that show for a long time.
Yeah.
But I love these fresh-faced, wonderful kids saying to me, I grew up with you. I grew up a little ahead of you.
And it was such a short period of time, really. It was only 3 years,
It was only
right?
3 years, but that was back in the day when we did at least 36 episodes a season. So that there are, and I know this for a fact because somebody just sent them to me, 104 episodes. As I'm sure people realize nowadays, it's, you know, maybe 9, maybe 20.
Yeah.
And so they don't have quite as long a shelf life. At any rate, I'm determined, I keep saying this, and I haven't done it yet, but I am determined to get in touch with Nick at Night and or Lifetime and find out why we can't resurrect that old show. I mean, we seniors need our residuals.
Now, that show came at a time that was difficult in your life, as from the whole management and what was going on with your career, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But I wonder, do you look back on it, has there been enough time that you can look back on it and see good things and happiness about it, or does what happened to the experience darken it for you?
It really doesn't.
Why not?
I can remember, certainly, almost chapter and verse, the dark times, but they're far outweighed by the love and goodness that I received from the people I worked with, which, I mean, they were not only my family, they were my social life, they were everything to me. And when someone asks me, as you just did, about it, there's a very natural smile that comes to my face and my heart.
Yeah.
Because, again, my perception would certainly be different had I not survived all of that. Mm-hmm. I now have the benefit of that, the benefit of a diagnosis for my illness, the benefit of lithium, which works well for me. And so I can now kind of look back from the grandma chair and say, it's a good life.
Yeah. There was a point you wrote your autobiography, the first book you wrote, Call Me Anna. And when you were about to publish it, what were the nerves like before? For people who don't know, this is the book where you tell it all.
No one's ever asked me that before. Very perceptive. The nerves prior to the publishing were just completely out of control. Not out of control in the sense of mania, but they were certainly physiological and emotional, and I realized eventually that it was old shame and fear that was generating this. It took a while. Certainly the publishing of the book and its success helped.
Yeah.
But But what helped most was getting involved in being a real advocate for mental health, in saying I'm the patient, and I'm going to tell you what it's been like and what it's like now. I am satisfying when I do that an aching kind of longing I had when I would be severely depressed, and a longing to, if I ever get out of this, I'm going to make sure nobody else ever goes through this. It's an extraordinary thing to experience. It really is.
Yeah, but you were going to stand naked before the world, in a sense. And I think, I look at so much that I read about you, and always in the beginning they talk about the mental illness. They talk about these problems. At the point that book was coming out, did you realize from that point on that was going to be a stamp on you? Or did you just feel you had to?
I hoped it was.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't realize actually until only about 5 years ago, when I had this epiphany, if you will, that I really had found my purpose in life. I've had a magnificent career, known, hugged some of the best people who ever lived, but I realized that was a means to an end. And the end, which isn't here yet, will be my commitment to bringing people to the help they need.
Yeah. Take me back to the beginning of all of this. When I read your story and I read what you went through, and there was your parents, and then you ended up going to a management parent, in a sense. The two of them kind of raised you outside of your family, and it was a very dark and difficult time. When we look then at the mental illness that you've suffered, and I know people talk about it being chemical and it's, genetic and all of this.
Right.
How do we balance, though, if you had been raised differently, if you had been raised in a sunshine and roses kind of childhood, would you have had the same problems later in life? Do the two go hand in hand?
It is my personal belief, and certainly I have studied others who believe, that somewhere along the line, something would have triggered it. Most often we know that or very often it's a loss, the death of someone close, or the loss of a dog, or a career. And I firmly believe that the manifestations of the illness would have come forth for me somewhere along the line. Because I believe that it is genetic, I can look back at my mother, who didn't have the benefit of mania. She was unipolar. I used to tell her I was sexier because I was bipolar. She would say, "Oh, Anna." And my dad, whom I only knew till I was 6 years old, he died when he was 50 of alcoholism, of cirrhosis of the liver. I choose to believe that he was self-medicating. Now, we can debate it till the cows come home, because this man also served in World War II, in Europe, and in Japan, the Sea of Japan. And there was certainly post-traumatic syndrome going on. But anyway, again, I get to choose. So I choose to believe that, and I can trace it even further back than that now. I have an Aunt Frances who lives in Port Washington, New York. And we talk often on the phone, and she reminds me of, well, you remember Aunt so-and-so. Now, she couldn't even leave her house. And so I get these tidbits of the puzzle. And that reaffirms for me my belief that it's a genetic disorder.
So, do you know when you first started to be affected by it? Can you pinpoint what would have been the trigger for you? Because you read the early history of yours, and there seems like there's a lot of places where it could have been triggered.
It was a Gatling gun.
And
I seem to always go back to when I was around 19, because that was the most obvious severe depression. But through the years, I've been able to remember other things. And I remember at the age of 12-ish having what we now know as panic attacks. But again, in my own personal review, I can slip those into the bipolar spectrum. So in childhood, I guess.
But 12 years old, you're doing what? Miracle Worker.
I
Wouldn't
was.
that be around the right time?
You are unbelievable.
So panic attacks, I think to the untrained eye, yeah, you're doing a Broadway show. You know, you're doing 8 shows a week. How
the difference was that, sure, I would have little butterflies when it was time to go on. The panic attacks were random, completely out of any kind of context, at least as I knew it. I remember once very clearly, it was an exquisite spring day in New York, and I was going to school, and we lived in a duplex. I came out the door, and there was a church across the street, and the sky was so blue behind it, and the clouds were just, those little billowy things. And even at 12 years old, I was able to take in that beauty. And and there was a cross on the church. As I turned around to bend down to get the milk out of the milk box to take up to my mother, it hit. And what hit was, there will come a time when I will never see this again. Fear of death, which became an obsessive fear for many, many years. Dropped the bottles, ran upstairs. My mother came out, and I was apologizing for dropping the bottles because my hands were wet. Never told her that my heart was pounding out of my body, that I could feel the pulse all over me. And she was not happy about the broken milk bottles, so we cleaned them up together, and by the time that activity was finished, it had passed. That's different than nerves,
Ever accused, though, of she's just being dramatic?
Do you think I was ever accused of that? I still have a flair. Yes, I think we very sadly are quick to judge something we probably don't understand. Mm-hmm. And drama queen is an easier fix than, how do I tell this person that maybe she needs to see someone who deals in the psyche.
Yeah.
Not the psychic. but that's fun.
That could help too, yeah.
That's fun. And again, I don't want to be like one of those reformed folks who goes around judging everybody who isn't enlightened. I want to reach that emotional part of them and enlighten them, and reassure them that there are answers.
What made you know it was time to finally go and seek help?
I didn't know. I certainly knew that at that point, 30 some odd years of this thing, and the rage in most recent years prior to the diagnosis. The rage that I had no idea where it would come from, and I would be the nicest mommy, and then all of a sudden this venom would come out, and a smack and a downgrading of little kids. That wasn't who I meant to be. And yet the denial was still very healthy.
Yeah.
I was married to John Aston at the time. We'd been married not quite 10 years. And my behavior had worn us all out.
Yeah.
And the marriage was failing or had failed. And I don't know why. I mean, sometimes I like to think it was divine intervention, but I decided to go see the psychiatrist, so maybe that would help me not go into some severe depression about the divorce and that kind of thing. As luck would have it, I kicked into a manic episode. The psychiatrist witnessed it. We did a few sessions like that, and finally the psychiatrist, Dr. Arlen, said, Anna, don't be frightened. I think you're manic depressive. Suddenly, again, physiologically, this feeling of elation came over me. And I said, thank God, it has a name.
Yeah.
And he said, and it has a treatment.
Even better than a name.
Even better. And that was frightening.
Yeah.
A little. I know now that it was frightening because the disease was now in jeopardy. And a little bit of the stigma of, oh God, now I'm going to be a card-carrying crazy. Nonetheless, I was worn out from myself, and I trusted him. And we went for the lithium therapy and continued talk therapy. And within 3 weeks, I didn't notice that I felt duh or have any other side effects. I just noticed an absence of the motor running. And a sense of freedom.
Yeah.
Now, this is not to say that there haven't been times since then when I've gotten frightened or had panic attacks or been moody. Moody may be a character flaw. Bipolar is not. And that's what I've had the opportunity to learn and reinforce because of my involvement in the world of mental health.
When they said lithium, when it was said, okay, here's something you can go on that's going to cut off the ends, you know, the extreme high and the extreme low. You'll still have emotion, but the extremes are going to be gone. Was there a part of you that feared losing who you were?
No.
Even though those were bad, but those were who you had been for so many years, or was it just so bad at that point?
Sometimes I have a very limited scope of it doesn't occur to me to think that far ahead. I think probably I knew that if something didn't happen, one of my suicide attempts was going to succeed. And it's kind of asked backwards, but it gave me a sense of security to go ahead. The creativity aspect, if you give up that magnificent euphoria, where are you going to get your jollies?
Right.
It hadn't occurred to me. I just wanted it all to stop.
Yeah.
In examining it since, I believe that I'm more creative than I ever was, partially because I can complete a thought now and then. But I'm able to now pick and choose creatively what I'd like to do, rather than having that raw thing fly out there and hope that somebody, like our director, is going to capture something and put it in order.
Right.
I'm a much more creative mother. My husband isn't here today, but I would hope that he would agree. I'm a more creative wife. And again, by that I mean I have the ability now to channel my sensitivities to be aware of what that person needs.
Yeah.
It isn't always what I need. It's been remarkable for my relationship with my kids, who suffered tremendously.
How hard was it for them to come to a point of forgiveness, assuming that they have?
I think it's a fair assumption that they have. There's a part of me that says, there may be a few dangling participles. It took them a while.
Yeah.
Because it takes a while to trust somebody who has behaved that way. My kids were always poised for the other shoe to drop. And post-diagnosis and treatment, they would still poke in those areas to see if the other shoe was going to drop. Again, I had the understanding given to me by the psychiatrist to be able to allow them to do that. Yeah. Which is not to say that there weren't a couple of times that I didn't fall right in the trap.
On the other side of all of this, I think we often, all of us, come in contact with a friend, a loved one, a person who is going through a depression. And maybe it's not fully clinically diagnosed depression, but are in a bad place. And all too often, our initial reaction, get over it, feel better, come on. What can we...
Get your bootstraps.
Yeah. What can we do to actually help somebody in a situation like that? Is there anything we can say? Was there anything that could have been said to you that would have been a bit of comfort other than a get over it?
No.
So what do we do?
Because those things were said. John Aston is a very kind man. He said just about anything that anyone could think of. And it might be a little Band-Aid.
Yeah.
But for a very short time. I think what we can say to people now is, first of all, our sincerity must be real. One would hope that we would be good listeners and find a very casual, almost, way to suggest professional help of some kind, which is usually met with anger, or get out of here, you're no help. But to have the stick-to-itiveness, and to, again, creatively find ways to assure these people that the judgment is not a part of this.
Yeah.
And that getting better is real. It really, really, really happens.
Yeah. I know that you go around and you talk to a lot of groups. Recently, you're in Houston speaking to a group. What is it you want to come out of what you say to them? What do you want them to take away?
First of all, when the first book came out and I did interviews, I would say very earnestly, if I can help one person, I'm satisfied. That was the biggest lie I ever told.
You're far from satisfied, are you?
I want them all. What I want them to take away is some of what we've been talking about, the reassurance that there's a little lady standing up there who has indeed had a life, good, bad, indifferent, for almost 25 years, and that it really is possible for them. I try actually to keep myself out of debates about this because I find them simply a waste of everybody's time. But that doesn't mean I can't be engaged.
Yeah.
And I think that I could go the distance in a debate about whether or not there is very real help for people who experience depression, for schizophrenics. Mm-hmm. I mean, what has happened in the last 25 years in the scientific and medical world is phenomenal. I mean, somebody was telling me the other day about work they were doing with autism. This is how I looked.
Yeah.
Huh? I thought autism was, that's it.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
It's a good time to be alive.
It truly is. It truly is. But it's also a time when we must continue to work to eradicate the stigma.
And it is time where we have to say goodbye.
You are something else.
And I promise next time it will be all Patty Duke's show, Valley of the Dolls, all that stuff. Okay?
Sean Astin's career.
Well, yeah, little Lord of the Rings in there,
when I
too.
go someplace now when it's a younger group, I have myself introduced
as
Sean Astin's mother.
Well, I'm going to say right now, thank you so much, Patty Duke.
Bless your heart. Thank you.
To order a transcript, call 866-652-3378 or send $6.95 to the address on your screen. Please include the name of the guest.